You're listening to Forever Fierce with Catherine Grace O'Connell, only on LA Talk Radio.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Forever Fierce Show. I am Catherine Grace O'Connell, and we are kicking off June, a new month, with Men's Health Month, with an exciting month ahead with actually 4 men. We're used to having a lot of women in here, but now we have some incredible men coming in to share their wisdom. And my guest today is a very special man to me. Arash Jacob is a physician turned healer, a man whose gifts are absolutely incredible. His gift lies in seeing the unseen, which to him is far more real than what is seen. To me, Arash, there are no words. Arash is an experience, which I hope everyone in the world can have, because I know his gifts have transformed my life. So with that, I would love to introduce and welcome Arash Jacob.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Catherine. It's my pleasure to be here. My name is Arash Jacob, and as lovely Catherine mentioned, I'm a physician turned healer. My story basically revolves around a time when I was about 7, and this connection between the unseen and I really developed. And ever since then, it's really navigated my life in some beautiful and magical ways. And I'm happy to be here and share that with everyone, really.
I love that. And if we can put the unseen into the language our audience might understand, it's really energy. Is that right? It's everything we see in between the spaces. Is that what you mean by the unseen?
Absolutely. So, we have different energies, different ethers, and we have the physical reality, we have the things that we can see, touch, taste, feel, and then we have the air that we breathe, and then we have the space inside the air, or the space that is everything but does nothing and nourishes everything. An energetic quality that we feel that connects us to the world, to the universe, to the cosmos, that within it lies a tremendous force, power, to be drawn upon at will by really anyone. And that's the beauty of it. Yeah.
So share that story when those gifts kind of came through. I know you've shared it with me many times.
Yeah, my pleasure. When I was 7, I became aware that there was something else in the world other than what I could see, smell, touch, taste, and feel. We used to love to play outside between mounds of dirt, because there was always construction around where I grew up. And I always used to love to walk around and explore, but the space between the trees and the cars really kind of drew me. I suddenly became aware that there was something else that existed in the world. And I realized that it also acknowledged me as a presence. So this exchange began to become developed. I wasn't fully conscious that young, but in my early 30s it became conscious. I decided to look around to see what I was going to do with my life, and I found osteopathic medicine, which at the time was essentially using your hands to diagnose and treat different musculoskeletal issues. I found I was really good at feeling, sensing, but the magic came one day when I had my hands on somebody, and I started to see things. I started to have these visions. And it didn't take me very long to figure out that I was connecting to people's memories. And I didn't know what to do about it, because they don't teach you anything about it. So I just kept learning what I was learning. But these visions, these connections to memories really became strong and stronger over time. And one day, after about 10 years of treating people with my hands, the memory layer began to really take up all the space in the room. It was like it was clapping to get my attention. And very soon thereafter, what I call layers of heart, mind, spirit, soul, if you will, opened up to me, and I felt like I was in the presence of these monster energies. And then there was the physical body, small and tidy. And I had worked on that for a long time, and I was really kind of expert in the anatomy and being a physician and all that. But I really felt this call to be pulled to these other things that I was feeling. And what I tell people is that's really when I was taken to school and taught about how this body, how this mind, how this heart work, who are the soldiers, who are the generals, who respond to whom. And that's really when things like autoimmune disorders, things like that previously as a holistic physician, we couldn't even come close. We couldn't even touch it, began to really turn around, sometimes dramatically, sometimes overnight. And that's when I started to take my hands off the body and never turned back since.
And I'm so grateful that you did.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because me personally, I have had the most incredible experiences, and I will write about them. There are so many that I can't even begin to share, but Arash really played a big role in my honestly still being here today. You saw me through my darkest times, through really life-threatening experiences.
Indeed.
And gave me incredible guidance, and that guidance, you aren't someone who tells somebody what to do. You see things that they can't necessarily see, but guide them to their own answers, at least in my own experience, and powerful answers that seem to dramatically, like quantum leaps in healing.
Yeah, we use the words miracle, but oftentimes I really see miracle as something that is in our awareness, that, like you said, we're not aware of, but oftentimes they're very nearby. And sometimes a helper or an assistant, like myself, can help to say, hey, what about this piece? What do you feel, sense, see about that? And suddenly it comes into consciousness, and two things become one, and that's my favorite thing, because healing is just when two things become one.
So as individuals that are so mind-based, or up until now, we're far more open to this world of the unseen, the world of energy. Are we in our own way? You say those miracles are like right here. What stops us from having those miracles created in our own lives?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a couple things stop us, but really I would say one or two of the main things are, one, the knowledge that they exist. We talk about the unseen, we talk about, some people call it the blackness, the void, whatever you want to call it. There's a big question as to, well, is it really there? Can we really prove it? And science at some point will get there. I think they're already close. But really it's a matter of, in your heart is where the investigation has to happen, because we're a part of this world, we're a part of this universe. So does the unseen exist? To me, it absolutely exists. And I've helped a lot of people connect to their mystical attributes, to their spiritual attributes. And once that happens, they begin to experience for themselves this truth. And so the unseen really needs to be verified within each individual person. I can say it's there, but if you don't believe it and you don't feel it, then it's not going to be true for you. So the blocks really, I feel, are in our level of awareness, our level of consciousness, that external connection to the unseen or mysticism being one, and then two, the internal connection to our own heart voice being the second one. And that second one, which is a very giant piece, I think, in our individual lives, can be obstructed by a whole slew of things, right? The main thing that obstructs that, I would say, is mind, essentially. Whether you're talking about conscious mind or subconscious mind or unconscious mind. Some things that we've been taught, some things that we've accepted, some things that from a level of human consciousness, or we call it collective consciousness, have been assumed to be true. Oftentimes when we begin to connect to the heart voice, it goes countercurrent to a lot of things that we think or have been taught or assume or our parents told us that were true. And so then we begin to sort of break into our path and out of old architectures.
So are we walking around basically these layers we talk about, building the layers? Is that really just the stories and the beliefs that we've taken on over time? And then what you do is through the connection to the heart, you start connecting to different aspects of yourself and an inner knowing that you may not, that helps your belief system and helps you to really heal and unravel these stories.
Absolutely, absolutely. Most people's heart voice, some people historically have called it an inner voice or an inner sense or an inner knowing, that most people's heart voice is very muted, very absent. Sometimes you'll have to scratch your head. Am I going crazy? Is that something I feel? Is that something I know? Oftentimes, especially when you're developing your intuition or you're developing your heart voice, as we'll call it, you don't know. You don't know if it's real. You don't know if it's true. You don't know if you can follow it. You don't know if you can listen to it, rely on it. And so the hesitancy is oftentimes a main key component for folks when they first get started on this road.
So when we're born, it sounds like what's natural is living from this heart space. But as life happens and these belief systems start, projections and, families telling us this is that and that's that, we start getting more into our mind and out of our hearts. And so we want to reverse that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wow, yeah, talk about when we're born. A lot of things happen when we're born, right?
You want to go there? Go ahead.
So we talk about nature versus nurture. We could go all of that. And certainly everything you're saying is accurate. We have teachings from our parents. We have society. We have schools. We have everything that teaches us how to be, how to think, and some of it's great, and some of it's we have to unlearn as we get older. But there's another thing that comes into play that tends to obstruct, or as you say, cover over this heart layer, and that's that our own mind and minds as we grow bring things forward, bring things out of us. So we talk about ancestral memories, but we have our own mind memories. That mind begins to evolve, and so we say, if anyone has kids, as I do, as you do, we see sometimes overnight they'll develop a new habit or a new personality. So where did that come from? They didn't have it, and suddenly they have it. And there are things inside of us that will trigger on, or click or turn on. That so not only do we have society to sort of undo, collective thoughts, parental thoughts, but we have our own historic thinking patterns that begin to sort of unfold, that we might have to be challenged to separate from.
What I love sharing is, in my community, Forever Fierce, we specifically kind of, our message is all about women at midlife and beyond, which to me is not an age, it's more an experience, and it's generally 35 and up, but we have women of all ages. You see a lot of these women waking up, a lot of the phoenix rising and kind of done with these stories. But we don't have to wait for midlife. We don't have to wait for a life-threatening experience. We don't have to wait, to go to the other side and come back to connect, do we? We can wake up. Like you said, these stories, something triggers them in an instant, but we can untrigger them in an instant, can't we?
Absolutely. The main ingredient that's needed for that is desire. So oftentimes that desire comes around by accident, right? We hit a certain age in life and we end up scratching our heads, so life isn't giving me what I want. People aren't looking at me or paying attention to me the way I want. Maybe my kids have graduated college and left home. So sometimes life will reflect to us that it's time for something to shift. But if a desire either burns in you now, or you want it to burn in you now, and you light a fire to it, that desire can bring these changes about at any time. So I think one of the things historically that spirituality has really colored badly is you shouldn't want anything, right? Talk about a lot of historical spirituality says, don't desire anything, right? Don't want anything. And so we said, we play small and, okay, try to not want anything. But the truth is that the kernel and the fire of desire lights everything. We're not talking about I want $10 million or I want a car. Or, those necessities can be real. But real desires, real heartful desires. I want to grow. I want to expand. I want to be everything that I have the potential to be. Once that desire gets lit, sky's the limit.
I think I've personally experienced that. So and you've witnessed it.
Yes, indeed.
It's an incredible. You would see things in me that I couldn't see. You would see obviously this power. Like I said, this knowingness, this sort of future self that I was really blind to. So share with our audience, because I think many women out there who are in the process of fiercely reinventing themselves, how can they access those parts of themselves and jump there, make a quantum leap to get to that future self that they have locked up inside of them?
Yeah, that's fantastic. So when I see folks, most folks will come to me because they're either lost or hit the bottom. I think we've all been there, lost, hit the bottom.
Found.
It reminds me of my daughter's jackets in Lost and Found. I can never find. But so we have two things essentially happen, and I think you experienced your version of this, which is pain and beauty. So we've all experienced pain in the world, and we've all experienced beauty in the world. Unfortunately, the human experience tends to be pain-centered. The problem with pain only happens, and I'll repeat this, it only happens when we try to tuck it away, when we try to avoid it, when we try to say, it never happened. Right? Pain is like a voice. If we can hear it, if we can allow it to speak, it is more about that freedom to let pain speak. If you can let pain speak tremendously, at some point beauty can speak more powerfully too.
That's beautiful. And one of the tools you taught me to really access those parts of myself was really just going, number one, it was a meditation where you taught me to basically get out of my freaking mind, which, I was out of my mind, but whatever, that's a whole other story. But to take really allow my mind to kind of float off, and then take my energy, attention, awareness and drop down into my heart. And then breathe in and out of my heart, so I would be in this space rather than, which we know now from scientific research and heart math and all that that's actually our biggest energy is from our heart. And so I could access real answers, and then I would go inside and I would just ask myself the questions. But I wouldn't answer them. I would allow those questions, be it pain, be it what I was going through at the time, the answers I was looking for, they're all in here ultimately, aren't they?
They really are. And they really are. Mm-hmm. Your experience of this particular reality, I think, is very beautiful, very powerful. And when we talk about the heart space, we talk about the area between the shoulders and the center of the chest, where if one has never listened to this space, or if one is never connected to this space, oftentimes I'll make the analogy, knock, knock on the door, as if you're knocking on one of these big, giant, wooden, medieval doors. And when you first begin to access, tap into, knock on this space, sometimes you'll get nothing. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's perfect if in the beginning you get nothing, because so many of us have, as you say, drifted from this, either gone into a mind space, a logical space, a mandatory space, an anxious space, whatever that is. But once we begin to access, knock, connect with on a consistent basis, Sometimes people see the heart as this flower that's waiting to love you, that's waiting to be with you. Oh my God, it's the most beautiful thing. Right?
That new agey thing.
Right. But the heart does require some persistence before it will open its doors to you. So what I would say to folks who are interested, who are intense, is if you decide to connect to this heart space, be there. Try it a little bit in a consistent way, even if it's just a few seconds a day. Try a few seconds a day every day. And listen. Because when we first start to work with this heart space, no matter how you get there, what we're really listening for is like a thread. And it's a thread in the beginning that you can't catch. You try to catch it and it just floats away. It's that gentle. It's that tender.
Ethereal.
It's that ethereal at first. Because it's nothing like the physical world that we know. In the physical world, you take a stick, you break it, you hear something, you see something. But in the inner world, there's a lot of listening, feeling, knowing, trusting, risking that is involved. But the first step is always trying and listening. So what I would recommend to folks is, Catherine's way is a beautiful way. If you can relax the mind, if you can allow the mind to float away, then you can automatically drift here. But for some folks, you can also just sort of put a hand here, or you can put your attention here. It doesn't matter how you get here. It just matters that you play around with it.
I love the metaphor of the string. What comes to mind for me, and has been my experience, is this thread. Once you get it, you can travel back in time and unhook those older energies through it, and that's where a lot of this powerful healing comes from. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. We talk about the heart specter. We talk about the heart chakra, if you will. Electromagnetically, you're 100% right. Those studies have been done, that this is one of the most powerful parts of our physiological anatomy. But energetically speaking, there's a tremendous amount of truth that's here. Now, if we go just a bit below that, in the center of the chest down to the solar plexus, the yogis call that the seat of prana, or the seat of energy. So when we have an emotional release, and certainly the heart can be the leader into any and all emotional openings, but when we have an emotional release, oftentimes we'll feel tremendous energy. We'll feel tremendously uplifted. And it's not because God or some other energy infused us with this tremendous power. It's because there's been an opening, a liberation of something that's been held tight. We call that trauma or pain, for lack of any better words. But you're right, there's a tremendous storehouse, and the key lies in that heart space.
I love that. Now, we were talking a bit about the New Age world, and I've been on this path, holistic healing and spirituality, for like 25 plus years, and I've experienced a lot of quote-unquote healers or, shamans, or what you do is absolutely dramatically different. And we were talking before the show about you're really a bridge. One thing, you're extremely grounded in reality and grounded in science and grounded in everything in the physical world, but your gifts extend to an entirely different universe. So how does our audience begin to really start, you've given some amazing tools, but even more so to connect to this unseen world, this intuitive world, this knowingness, to massively change their belief system?
So the first thing is to know, or if you have to, mandatorily assume that the unseen exists and that heart truth exists. If we can just for now, assume that those two are reality. I know them as reality, but for someone who's just starting out, I would say be skeptical. Okay, because if you're not skeptical and you're not questioning and you're not judging, which I certainly did when I started, it's going to be hard for you to sort through what the truth is. But if we're talking about bringing in that miraculous reality, we have to start out with the very strong possibility that the unseen exists, the very strong possibility that our inner truth is present and is powerful, and the fact that there is a relationship between this heart space, the things you can't see, and this physical reality, the things you can see. Because when you make mention, Catherine, of this, for example, my capacity to be grounded, which is indeed a gift, and to be able to connect to realms or energies that are seemingly very ethereal and very ungrounded. To me, both are extremely beautiful. The humanness is extremely beautiful, and the spirituality, the unseen, is tremendously beautiful. And the most powerful thing is to experience both, to develop both simultaneously, to accept both, even if it's temporary, so that you can see, is it a reality? Is it not a reality? And what I would recommend is two-minute meditations. One would be a 2-minute meditation during the day, or you can call it a mini meditation or a playfulness, where one can use this particular technique to connect with the unseen, and that is, the unseen is like a whisper in the wind. And we're not used to trying to hear that, right?
Opposite of what we're taught.
Right. We want tangible things.
Exactly.
Okay, and that's normal, that's human. But now we're talking about being superhuman or transcending that humanity.
The metaphysic.
The metaphysical, and even bringing it into reality. Some people call that manifesting.
I know, right? Again, woo.
I'm not crazy about that word. That word has made a lot of people a little bit nutty.
Yes.
But if we want to talk about true manifestation, I would want to change that word into understanding. If we go back to the 2-minute meditation of listening to that whisper in the wind, if we just sit together for a moment here and we just listen to the whisper in the wind, even in this room, even in this earth, on this planet, there becomes almost a sensitivity, a dance inside of our beings that begins to resonate. So whisper in the wind, it's not really the wind because you can hear the wind, but there's a whisper in there between the molecules of air that you can listen for. And again, you don't have to hear anything, but just the act of listening connects us. Just the act of listening to that whisper in the wind brings this state of being. There's a lot of talk about being in this new age.
Yeah, right. In this new age, that's a whole other show.
Right.
Be careful.
Right.
Caution the wind out there. Yeah,
so how do
beingness.
Beingness. This being. How do we get there? And one very simple way is to begin to listen to this, what I call whisper in the wind. And if you do that for 30 seconds or just 2 minutes a day here and there, I think it can be tremendously powerful to begin to get you on that resonant spectrum where you can begin to experience this beingness in the world that will give you a feeling, and then you can determine from your own experience, your own feeling, how much truth is in what you're connecting to, is in that unseen or that whisper in the wind. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is another 1 minute or 2 minute meditation in terms of sitting inside oneself, sitting in this heart specter between the chest, between the shoulders and the center of the chest, in that heart space, and listening for that heart thread, that heart voice. Is there anybody there? Hello, hello. If you have a question, ask it. If you have a thought, toss it in there. See if anything comes back. I would say, we talked earlier about some measure of consistency, some measure of persistency. If you try a minute of each, whisper in the wind, thread of the heart, maybe for 30 days, you can try a minute or two of each and see for yourself. Because unless one experiences for themselves, we can throw everything away. It's not going to work. Yeah.
I think that's beautiful and empowering, that in the end, the power is within us, and it also can't really be forced. This is a gentle process of reconnection to our heart. And in my experience, just pain trauma, I've had a lot of traumas in my life, as you know. Does that bring us out of our bodies and then we need to come back in? What is really going on with this disconnection that is the opposite of what's natural?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. And pain, of course, comes in many forms, right? We have historical trauma, we have emotional trauma, physical trauma, sexual trauma, all kinds of trauma. And certainly some traumas can produce enough shock to move a person out of their body. But oftentimes what trauma does is it leaves an imprint, that force, which is a very powerful human word. It really has much different meaning in the spiritual world. But force in the human world is very scary. Whether it's a physical force, whether someone has physically pushed you or abused you, whether someone has emotionally forced their will on you, as many of our parents did and their parents did to them. There's this force, there's this push, there's this imprint. And over time, we get the idea that that's the only way to do things. That's the only way things ever got done, so that's the only way they're going to get done. It's not up here, but it's an instinct that pushes us toward force.
Is it a patterning?
It can absolutely be a patterning. It's an ancestral pattern. This has happened for millennia in the human history. But if we look at ourselves, if we look at how we treat ourselves, if we look at how we push ourselves, one of the funniest things that I ever heard growing up, and I didn't realize why it sounded so odd to me until several years ago, but I would always hear people say, work hard. Say, work hard. And I always thought there's something wrong with that sentence. Work hard. That certainly doesn't sound like fun. It certainly doesn't sound like life or beauty. Why doesn't anybody ever say work soft or work beautifully?
I love that.
Yeah. It takes on a whole different...
What a new concept.
Right.
Look forward to the day. Monday becomes a beautiful day, right?
If we can begin to say, how can I inject some softness into this hardness? Come home, do this. The rigidity of structure, if we take a look at how we plan our days, if we take a look at no breaks, no time for play, no time for fun. But more than that, how can we work beautifully? And beauty to you may be a little different than beauty to me or beauty to our viewers. But whatever beauty, softness, peace is to an individual, if that can be moved into practice, then it's easier to hear the whisper in the wind. Or if you practice listening to the whisper in the wind, as we talk about listening to the unseen, at some point that will begin to infuse your life. You'll begin to look at something rigid maybe that you do, or a rigid way that you think, well, that doesn't feel like a whisper in the wind. How can I shift it? How can I change it? And you would always be on the right track, because you'd be moving away from force and toward beauty and softness and real power.
So there were these ancient mystical teachings. You quote Rumi a lot, whom I love. And then now over time, I hate to use the word bastardized, but it seems to me that in this in the New Age world, a lot of this has been bastardized. So number one, I am a huge proponent of discernment, which takes a while to learn. But how do we know what's real and what's not? There's so many things like, is everything that's going on inside of us really reflected out here? Is everything that's out here is our fault? I mean, there's so many things that get twisted in this New Age world. How does our audience know what's real and what's not, and how to know to discern between the two?
That's a great question. Reality is so personally objective, subjective, or objective and subjective. And there are a lot of forms of teaching that say everything in your reality is your own construct. That can be true, it can not be true. I would imagine for most people, it's not clear that that's true. The truth is that we start where we start. So if I were to tell somebody that everything in your world is your reality, they could accept it or reject it. But if I were to say your heart voice can speak louder in your life and begin to morph and shift and change your life, most intuitive people, most sensitive people, most human people would say, wow, that sounds interesting, that sounds intriguing. So, and you're right, we could create a whole show just around how reality is created. But if we're talking about changing the reality that we're in right now, then we're talking about moving more heart effort, moving more heart voice, moving more heart thread, and laying it down in our lives, in our days, in what we eat, in what we do, and whom we talk to, and how we talk to them, and how we talk to ourselves. So my feeling is that we can really change the reality. If you don't like the reality that's in front of you,
you have power.
Tremendous power. And most of us feel like we have to do something to change things. And I'm saying, but wait, we have to listen to something to change things. So it's not so much in the doing, change it, I can work really hard, or I can listen really soft. And suddenly you may realize, my God, I'm in a completely different direction. I'm in a completely different direction than where I need to be. I need to be over here, and suddenly everything hard regarding your job, for example, can begin to fall away because you realize suddenly you need to be on this track toward a different job, for example. Yeah.
Do you see a massive shift in consciousness? We talk about that a lot. There's a lot of things going on. When I was growing up, certainly we didn't talk openly about, nobody knew about meditation. It was like prayer in church. But there's so many tools there. We talk about self-awareness. We talk about, connecting the inside, intuition, all these words I didn't know as a child. What is going on with this sort of bringing light into the world?
I definitely have felt, especially in the last few years, but overall in the last 5 to 7, maybe even 8 years, that this shift in consciousness is happening, not only happening, but ramping up. The shift in consciousness. You talk about light. I would say the shift in consciousness is about sight. So unless you can see something clearly, nothing changes. Right?
It's awareness.
Awareness. So we talk about listening to the heart thread. Listening to the heart thread and hearing, feeling, or seeing something different is a form of sight. It's a form of heart sight. Now, for heart sight, we need light. So light is very, very powerful, very, very necessary. How do we create light inside of ourselves? By listening, by connecting, by not leaving the medieval wooden door that's right here, by continuing to knock on that door. This is an effort of light. This is an effort of light. And it can help to improve our sight. When our sight begins to improve, whether you're talking about third eye sight, heart sight, inner knowing, it's all the same, then that has the power to shine on our lives and really change everything, transform.
So it's really very simple, but we're the ones in our minds who make it very complicated.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it
I
comes
think
down to it.
Right. There's some sort of monster achievement in complication. I don't know how that happened, but it happened.
I hear that. So recently I had on the show a woman by the name of Nanine McCool. She's a woman who is around my age, 50, mid-50s. And there was a clip that went viral about her standing up for the first time publicly to Tony Robbins. You know who Tony Robbins is, right?
Okay. I've heard the name.
Yeah, I've heard the name. So in my research then to have her on the show, there was this documentary done on Tony Robbins that he uses as a promotional tool, and it's called I'm Not Your Guru. And I was so disturbed by what I saw. And I see this very... it's very common in the New Age world where he would say, I'm not your guru, but literally people in the audience, one after the other, would stand up and ask a question. He would tell them the answer and hammer it into them. And basically, like this one woman stood up and, was going through a really difficult relationship. He said, get up your effing phone right now and you call him and you end it. And she did it and was sobbing and so upset. And here, to me, that is a really dangerous thing out there when... That is not the experience I've had with you. You are at such a beautiful level of consciousness that everything, the answers always come up inside of me and the power is always inside of me. So how does our audience, discern and make sure that they're working with people that really have a high level of consciousness and give them the power back rather than taking, to me, that's taking the person's power.
Right, exactly so. To each person, I would say, trust your intuition the best that you can. It doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean you'll never make a mistake. But if you're receiving help from somebody and feel squashed and feel powerless and feel like you're receiving from them the direction that you would like to cultivate, then that's not sustainable. It's not going to empower the individual. It's not going to empower a person who wants to be empowered. Oftentimes, I found several, of course there's no shortage of them, but around me there are several institutions that are proponents, very quietly, covertly, of depowering or disempowering people. And all those people eventually end up coming to me, one facet or another, because at some point something will click inside of them that says, man, this doesn't feel right.
Right, it's feel.
Right? So even if that heart voice isn't as strong as you want it to be, if we duck down a notch, there's an intuition that at some point will just kick in instinctually for survival, for growth, that'll say, that might be a tightening in your gut. But it's an essential intuition that isn't everyone to different degrees that is accessible. So if your intuition is saying, don't do it, or you're getting heart palpitations, or you're sweating before you go into a session with somebody, you got to listen to your body on that level, because the body senses fear, and if you don't feel safe, it will let you know. So I will say, listen to your body, listen to your intuition. Some very basic things that'll get you out of a lot of hot water.
Awesome. I love that whole empowerment process, and we have an audience out there waiting to empower themselves. So before we wrap up and let everyone know where to find you, you shared a story about a woman who came into your office recently, which reminded me a lot of me, where at times she's not really able to function in the world because I can feel everything. I can feel, it sounds kind of weird, but I'm such an empath that I take on people's pain, and sometimes it really shuts me down. And the women in our audience, I can't tell you how many have shared that experience with me. So if a woman is out there right now feeling and judging herself because of it and really shut down because of it, that's really a gift, isn't it? And how to overcome that, how to work with that, so she empowers herself to see it as something beautiful and getting past, being able to get out there and function in the world.
It's really a beautiful sentiment, and I have the pleasure and honor of working with a lot of beautiful women, internally beautiful, sensitive women, creative women, photographers, all kinds of creative women. And the more creative a woman is, the more sensitive she is. The more spiritual she is, the more sensitive it is. It's mandatory. And anybody who tries to shut that down at some point in their life will have to revisit it, will have to reawaken to it. So to those women who are very sensitive, very creative, very spiritual, have these ethereal connections or even angelic connections, as we spoke about a little bit before, I would say to them, that's a lot of where your power lies. So if you don't know how to connect to spirituality, so I haven't gone to church enough, I don't have the credentials.
You'll find it there. Not necessarily, sometimes.
I would say, ask anyway. Ask your angels, ask your guides, ask what sounds kooky and see for yourself. Does it give you benefit? Does it ground you? Does it give you direction that helps you? Or not? It might not be the right path, but it might be the right path.
And when you say that, it makes me think, too, that, and to me, now having grown up Catholic, I've expanded beyond that. Not that I think it's beautiful, the original intention. Church is everywhere. Church is nature. Church is, wherever. To me, church is here.
Indeed. Wherever you find beauty and wherever you find peace is the most powerful. The thing with connecting to heart truth is that when you begin to feel, sense, see, or hear any thread of heart truth, there will always be its right-hand man, which is peace.
Yeah.
Peace and truth always will go together. So if you're feeling anxious, I would say stop, hold the presses. Something's off.
Yes.
Reevaluate, recheck. It might be an old fear, or it might be your body saying, hold on, wait. So to those ultra-sensitive gals, I feel, believe, know, you guys are some of the most powerful people on the planet.
Truth, sisters. I'm telling you right now, it really
That's
is.
the way it is.
It's a gift, and to really embrace it rather than fight it. So it's really simple. Pain, beauty, peace, pain. In the end, it's our choice, like you said. So I want to make sure that everyone knows, because you're really expanding beyond. Up until now, you have had an office in LA where you can offer phone sessions and Skype sessions, but you were really expanding way beyond. So I want everyone to know where to find you, how to work with you, and what's coming.
Oh, of course, yes. So I have a private practice in Beverly Hills.
Go.
Right. I used to see people only in the office, and since these intuitions and seeings have been happening and ability to heal sort of at distance or remotely, it's been several years now, over 6 years, that I've been seeing folks at distance. So I have phone sessions, I have Skype sessions, I see people in the UK and across the country. People say, well, I don't know how to come to you. Should I come in person? Should I come in? Which one's more powerful? And I would say to you, whichever one feels right to you. We're back to that.
We are back to that. Always back to that.
Is the right thing to start with. So I'm in LA. I have those 3 types of sessions, and anyone who feels drawn to me or wants to come in or wants to dig deeper, explore deeper, more than welcome. Yeah, my website is arasheshealing.com. So my name, arasheshealing.com, and appointments are made online, and you can sort of peruse it and check out everything.
We'll have the website there, everyone, all the information for you guys to book a session, be it virtually or in person. Clearly, I've experienced both, and he's such a rock star. Energetically, it really doesn't matter, but his presence is it's like you were in college and your college friends kept coming to your dorm room and saying, you're a refuge. Like, who says that in college? Like,
yeah.
I want a beer, but no, I go to Arash's.
that was hilarious. I mean, it was Saturday morning, and 4 of my buddies would show up at my door in this little studio that later on I felt like, man, how did I live in this dump for so long? But when you're a student, all things go. And they would come over. We were supposed to go out, and one of them would end up laying on my bed, and the other would straddle himself, or, drape himself over my love seat. One would sprawl out on the floor. And for about 20, 30 minutes, nobody would go anywhere. And after a while, my little apartment became called the House of Rehab.
You've moved beyond that, but
right,
in a different way. It's a different kind of rehab, but yeah.
But I think everybody, needs a place where that can happen. So.
Yeah, I thought that was just such a beautiful, metaphor for what you do. You are a refuge. You have been my refuge in those times when I'm in the storm and I don't really know how to, get out from the, outside of the tornado into the eye. And you really helped me. I honestly wouldn't be here today without. I don't believe I would, without your assistance, really seeing things that I couldn't begin to see.
Thank you, and it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. The more sensitive, the more spiritual a person is, probably the more they would benefit from a person like myself, if they feel like they need the help.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he's been my refuge, and it's interesting because I know a Forever Fierce woman recently reached out and saw my testimonial on Arash's website and called him and is now working with him. So I can't recommend it enough. And I'm so delighted to have had you on the show.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll have lots more, things to share with our audience as you continually develop these programs going forward. So in the meantime, I thank you all for tuning in. Podcasts will be available, and Arash's information will be on there as well. And have a beautiful day. Cheers, beauties. Stay fierce.
You're listening to Forever Fierce with Catherine Grace O'Connell, only on LA Talk Radio.